we are now live again. We're going to see if we can get everyone back on this session. I know we had some difficulties before with the sound, so we're going to see if we can get everybody live again. And let's see if we can get this one working. So welcome, everyone. We had some technical difficulties. We are restreaming on a new live. We're just going to wait till everyone joins our Facebook Live again and make sure that they can all hear us now. Some technical difficulties, sometimes the streaming, just by fluke. Oh, I see that people can hear me, so that's great. We're just going to wait till everyone joins. We apologize about that. Sometimes, we do all the same things, and technical difficulties by the system. So, but I hear Tambra said she can hear me loud and clear, so that's great. We'll give it a few minutes for everyone to rejoin. I hope they're able to. We have a great session lined up for you today, so I hope that everyone is able to rejoin the live. We're starting again, and this time I think everyone can hear, so I'm glad we worked that out. We apologize for those technical difficulties. So we're just going to see if people are still joining. Thank you, everyone, for your patience as we worked out this little issue that we had with the sound. But I see that everyone's coming back. We have Kitty from Atlanta, Georgia. Stephen says he was running late anyway, so perfect timing. Glad we could be of assistance, Stephen. Dina says, no worries, and she always appreciates the videos. So glad to hear. We love hearing that. So I see everyone is slowly making it back to the live. So glad. Thank you, everyone, for joining. So we're so excited about today's session. We have a fantastic guest with us today. We have with us Melissa Barker. And before we get to the session, I'll let you know about a giveaway that we have at the end of today's session, just after we answer questions. We'll be giving away a MyHeritage Complete plan. It's the best plan that we have to offer at MyHeritage. It'll give you access to over 15 billion historical records. It'll unlimited family tree size, access to all of our photo tools at MyHeritage, a real fantastic gift for you or for a family member. We're excited to give it away to one lucky winner. So because we'll be talking about dragging information out of family members, what we're going to be giving the giveaway for is please leave a comment in the comments section and let us know about a family story or a family rumor, something that you've learned from your family over the years that you were able to confirm on MyHeritage. We'd love to hear those stories. Leave us a comment in the comment section and we'll be choosing one lucky winner at the end of today's session. As always, feel free to leave comments in the comment section, questions throughout. Our guest Melissa loves taking questions at the end and is just so thorough. And so any question that may arise, just put it in the comment section and we hope to get to it. So now let me introduce our speaker. We have with us Melissa Barker. She's a certified archives manager and public historian, and she currently works at the Houston County, Tennessee Archives. We know her affectionately as the Archive Lady, as she is known in the whole genealogy community. She lectures, teaches, and writes regularly about genealogy research and researching in the archives and records preservation. She's been with us for a few Facebook Lives in the past, so feel free to check those out after on our Facebook page under the videos section. And now it's my pleasure to introduce her to all of you. So let me bring her onto the screen here, and she can say hello. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Esther. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending today. I really appreciate you all coming out and getting through these technical difficulties. I had some technical difficulties to begin with. And so if you're ready, Esther, I'll get going.
Great. Fantastic. So let me bring up your slides here. Let's see. We'll get them rolling. There we go. All ready to go.
Thank you, Esther. And if there's any glitches or anything, please just stop me and we will start from where we left off.
Of course.
Okay, well, today I'm going to talk about family gatherings. Now, here in the United States, we are fast approaching Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so I know that in other countries, there is not Thanksgiving, but you have other family gatherings. So if you're getting together for a family member's birthday, or you're getting together to celebrate a christening, or Hanukkah, or any time any of you and some of your family members are getting together, this is going to be a great presentation to give you some tips and tricks to get your family members talking. Now, with COVID, a lot of places are starting to now ease up. Things are starting to look like normal, if we even know what normal looks like anymore. And so hopefully you can start gathering with your family members again. Now, we can also use these tips and tricks if we are gathering with our family virtually. I actually had COVID last year at Christmas time, so I had to gather with my family virtually. We could not get together. And so these tips and tricks are going to help you. And one of the things I was talking to Esther about before we got started was the fact that many of us overlook the fact we need to be talking to our siblings, our cousins, our aunts and uncles, all of the people that are parts of our family, because they have stories to tell themselves of their own history, but they also have family stories, family lore, things and stories that they know that you maybe haven't been told. I told Esther about an incident that I had with my brother a few years ago. My brother is 6 years older than me. We were at my parents' house having a family dinner. We had stepped outside to just talk, and I was really just feeling very good that day. And I mentioned that how wonderful it was, the family that we grew up in, that it was kind of a leave it to beaver type of family. And he looked at me and he said, "What family did you grow up in?" And so, being 6 years older than me, he experienced some things before I came along. And so, we got to talking and found out that we had a different experience. And that is what I'm talking about. We need to talk to our family members about their experiences because they're going to be different from ours. And so, family gatherings, we all have them, whether it's a family reunion, maybe it's a specific birthday that you're having, but you should take the opportunity as your family historian, as your family genealogist, to talk to these family members. Now, it's not easy a lot of the times. I know. I've been there. We have the family members that are just totally not interested in this. But if you take some of these tips and tricks and use them, you're going to be able to talk to your family members, and they're not going to even realize that you're getting information out of them. So the photo there on the left is actually a photograph from the Houston County, Tennessee archives where I work. It is not identified, but it looks like a family gathering of some sort. The photo there on the right is from a Burcham family reunion on my husband's side. They no longer have those family reunions because the lady there in the middle, my husband's grandmother, Miss Ruth, she passed away. And so after that, they just stopped having these reunions. So family gatherings, they could be any kind of family gatherings. But normally you're going to have some of those uncooperative relatives, like I like to call them. And those uncooperative relatives are those that say things like, why do you want to know all that stuff about our family? That's what Miss Ruth, my husband's grandmother, would say to me. Why do you want to know this stuff? Because she didn't understand why I wanted to research the family history. And then they'll also say to you, I can't remember anything. Don't ask me. They really have more in them than they realize. And so, using some of the things I'm going to show you today, I think you'll be able to get some things out of them that they didn't even realize they knew. Or how about this one? We just didn't talk about it. That was the way of the world back in the day. They just didn't talk about a lot of things, but they listened. And so a lot of times our relatives know things because they listened, they were around. And so this is things we need to find out. Maybe you are the lone genealogist in your family. I am that way. I am the keeper of the family stuff, they tell me. I'm the lone genealogist. I'm the only one in my family that is actually researching and preserving family records, preserving the family history. If you're one of those, then it is even more important that you talk to your family members and get as much information out of them before they're no longer with us. I wish I had talked to my grandmother before she died. However, I was not into genealogy at the time. She died when I was 19. And so I wish that I had talked to her because there are so many questions I need answered now that I can't get answers to. Are you the keeper of the family history? Many of us are. You know, we get the phone call from a cousin that says, I'm going to send you this photo album because you keep all that stuff and I don't want it. So we're keeper of the family history. It's a very important and honorable job to have, because it's up to you now to make sure that family history lives on so that our descendants know about our family. Preserving your family history is up to you, and a lot of times up to you alone. And so it's okay. It's okay that you can do this. We, as genealogists and as family historians, we can preserve our family history, pass it down to the next generations, and then it will continue. Your efforts are important. I know that my heritage is always telling us how important it is that their records and genealogists connect, and that we preserve these records, preserve these information, preserve the photographs for our descendants. And a lot of our children and grandchildren, they may not be interested right now, but if you will just preserve it, keep collecting it, keep telling the stories, I think they'll finally get it. So what you have to be is a little sneaky, but you have to be nice about it. There's no reason to be mean about it or anything, but kind of sneaky to get that information out of your relatives. But you're going to be a nice sneaky. We're going to have to be sneaky, but it always be nice and considerate with our family members. If they truly just do not want to talk about it, don't pressure them, because you're not going to get anything out of them that way. So we want our family members to tell us the information we're looking for, or any information that they may have, but we don't kind of want them to really realize that they're actually doing it. So here are some tips and tricks to start with. They actually know more than they think they know. When they tell you, I don't know anything, or I don't remember anything, they probably know more. It's just how you go about getting the information out of them. And we're going to talk about some specific ways that we can do that. Maybe once you get them started talking, it may be hard to get them to quit, and that's what you want. Now, I shared this photograph particularly with this tip because I met with Miss Audrey von Baggett when she was donating some German Bibles and to our archives. And what I remember about this situation is the fact that she started talking and she kept talking and she kept talking, which was wonderful, but I had to be somewhere else. And so I had to cut it short. And so if we can get our family members talking, a lot of times they'll continue to talk, continue to tell us stories, and we should be recording those. We, as a family genealogist and family historian, I feel like it's our job, it's our duty to get whatever information out of our family members that we can. Whether it's a small piece of information, or even if it's a piece of information that creates more questions or makes us go and do more research, that's okay. We're getting this information out of them and down on paper. So whatever prompts, whatever things that you can use to accomplish your goal is what we need to use. And I'm going to show you some really neat things that you can use that are not genealogy in their face related. You're going to come about it from the side maybe. So we're going to talk about these particular things that will help you to get your family members talking. So first and foremost, family photographs. I find that family photographs will get people talking, and we're going to talk more about that. Then we're going to talk about home movies. If you have home movies, this is a great visual to try to get your family members talking. How about family recipes? I find that this is a great visual. It's a great tasting memory that we can talk about. So we're going to talk about family recipes. Handmade artifacts. If any of our ancestors, family members made anything, we can use that to our advantage. Showing something and having your family member hold something can trigger memories. And so we're going to talk about that too. And then we're going to talk about historical or local events. Just like this photograph here from our archives, this is a photograph of when they opened the Erin Post Office here in Houston County, Tennessee in 1960. And so if your family members were from this area, if they were alive and they attended this opening of this new post office, they may have stories to tell. And so this is what I'm talking about using those historical and local events. And then family traditions. All of our families have family traditions, whether they're small, whether they're large, whether they have been passed down from generation to generation. That's what we want to do. We want to make sure that it's passed down. And the two pictures that I'm using are interesting because they come from my family. The canning up there, canning of peaches, my mother canned peaches and green beans and other things. And she passed that down, not to me. I don't cook. But it skipped a generation and actually went to my daughter. My daughter loves to can. And so I'm proud that it is being passed down through the generations. And then the bottom picture are flowers. My daughter, Caitlin Watson, has a green thumb like nobody's business. She gets that from her father's side of the family. My husband's grandmother Ruth actually could grow anything. I kill everything. I do not have a green thumb. So again, it skipped a generation and went straight to my daughter. But these are some family traditions, things that we did in the family that have been passed down. So we're going to talk about all of these things in a little more detail. So let's start with family photographs. All of us families, we have photographs. I mean, I think that's the one thing that we can all say that we all have, whether we have a few snapshots or whether we have tubs and tubs full of photographs. I do not have a whole lot of older photographs, but I have a lot of photographs dating from about the 1950s forward. And I'm grateful for that. And so using family photographs to get your family members talking is one of the best tools that we can use. Now, one thing I would encourage you to do is that when you're showing photographs or talking to your family members about photographs, don't immediately ask about the people in the photographs. They can be hard whenever you look at a photograph and you immediately want to know who the people are because they probably aren't going to know, and then it kind of puts them off looking at photographs. So photographs can be our best source to get our family members talking. Bring them out during the family gathering and pass them around and show them the photographs and just see what kind of stories people will tell and what kind of tidbits you can hear about those. Again, don't specifically go for the people in the photographs. Ask about the vehicles in the photograph or the buildings or the place, the time of year. Was it a snowy picture? Was it a spring picture? Was it a fall picture? Ask things like who, what, when, and where, and any other questions you can think of about the photograph. Getting to the people later is good. And then I think you may even be surprised that once you start talking about other aspects of the photograph, someone in your family gathering will come up with the names of the people in the photograph as they keep talking. And so not starting with those people in the photograph will not put off your family members. I think talking about the cars, a lot of people know about cars, and so asking them, hey, what kind of make of car is this, or what year do you think this car is? Starting with that, that's pretty simple, but it will get them talking and get them talking about things in the photograph, and then they're not even going to realize they're giving you information that you're needing. Here are some great photographs. The photograph there on the left is a photograph of my husband's great-great-grandfather, Cody Cosby Burcham, and his son, Alan Daniel Burcham, taken in the 1950s in downtown Erin. Now, what I would do with this photograph is I would ask about the building in the background. I would ask, especially if I'm talking to his family members who live in the area, I would say, even if I know what the building is, I would ask them, what building is that in the background? And then they would tell me what the building is. Well, where is that building located? Then maybe they would tell us where the location is. But eventually it would come around to these two men standing in this photograph, and almost always they can tell me who they are because they have gotten themselves acclimated to where they are, where this building is, and who these people could be. The picture there at the top of a house, this is the Barker home place. It is no longer there, but this is where my husband's father and Miss Ruth, his grandmother, actually lived and grew up. And so you could ask all kinds of, just showing this photograph to family members. I guarantee you that you're going to get stories about family reunions, about things. This house is actually at a four-way stop on a corner, and so they experienced a lot of different things on that corner. They actually had a store that was beside this house, so you could ask about the store. I guarantee you, just a picture of the old home place will generate a lot of conversation. And then the photograph there at the bottom is a photograph of my grandmother, Agnes Curtis, and her sister, Josephine, from the 1930s. You could talk about the fashion. You could talk about their makeup and their hairstyles. And then maybe get around to talking about the people in the photograph, if they remembered those people, if they knew their children, their grandchildren, their other siblings. And so you could get all kinds of information from just looking at family photographs. Here are a couple more great photographs. These are photographs of my grandfather on my mother's side. His name was Forrest Cecil Bartram. The first one there on the left is from the 1940s when he was in World War II. And he has got his uniform on there. And then the one on the right is where he went on a fishing trip. My mother and her siblings and my grandmother and grandfather used to go to Rice Lake in Canada every year for vacation because they lived in Ohio, and so they would go there. And so I've used these photographs with my mother, with her siblings, to ask questions about not only my grandfather, but about their vacations when they would go to Rice Lake in Canada. And so, like I said, photographs can be one of the best resources we have to gather information. And then here's a couple more before we move on to the next one. The one there on the left is a photograph of a couple of women, my husband's family, with a turning wheel there. And so it's not dated. I don't have a date for it, but you can ask all kinds of questions about the house, about the equipment there, about even their fashion, what they're wearing, their hairstyles, things like that. And then my favorite photograph is there on the right. This is Miss Ruth again, the store I told you that was beside the house. This is the only photograph of the inside of that store that I have, and it dates from about the 1950s. And so what I have done in the past is when I've pulled this photograph out and started talking to some of the family members, I would actually start talking about some of the food items on the shelf. And then once I started talking about that, they would actually start leading the conversation and start talking about Ruth and the store and the candy jars that were on the counter. And so it's very interesting to hear our family members talk about photographs. Next, let's talk about home movies or photo slides if you have these. You may have home movies. You may have the old 8mm. You may have home movies on VHS, Betamax. When was the last time you heard Betamax? DVDs, and then you may even have some of those old photo slides. Well, first and foremost, I would encourage you to get these transferred over to a medium that you can get them digitized so that they're easier to show. I have some 8mm film. I actually have an 8mm projector and a screen, and so we've pulled them out and we've shown them before, but I'm now in the process of getting them transferred over to a digital medium. That it's just easier to show that way, easier for our family members to enjoy. You can actually send them to them. But a lot of times these home movies, even if there's no sound, you can watch our family members, our ancestors moving and in their own habitat, as I like to call it, in their own homes, in their own cities. That can generate some memories from your family members. And so getting these home movies out, getting the slides out at the family event is even funner. So make sure you have the equipment that you need to show these movies or slides. Or like I said, get them converted so that you can show them on the computer. You can maybe even show them on your phone to your family members when you're at the event. Movies and slides are a great use of visuals. I'm a visual learner. I learn by doing and by watching. If I were to pick up a manual for a piece of equipment, that would do nothing for me. I just need to use the piece of equipment. That's how I learn. And so many of our family members, their minds, their memories are going to be jolted by visuals such as photographs or home movies, things like this. That's why it's important to use these to our advantage. Why not arrange a special family gathering and show the home movies or slides? Make it a special event. Maybe even send out really cute invitations to invite your family members. And this could be done over Zoom as well. Do it virtually, especially if you have family members that don't all live in the same area. Maybe you have family members live in different countries or different parts of the country. You could still do this if you have these digitized, and you can just show them through a virtual means. But do this. Get these out there. Show them to your family members. Maybe they've never seen them before. And once they see them, they can recognize the people, recognize the homes or the places, and maybe even recognize the events as to why these movies or slides were done in the first place. And be sure to have your pen and paper ready to start writing down the stories and the information you're going to definitely get. Making these movies and slides part of a planned family gathering, such as a birthday party, a Father's Day event, maybe at the holidays, or maybe at the anniversary of a family member or an ancestor's birthday or anniversary. We did this for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. I had some 8mm from when my parents were younger, were teenagers, and we set up the projector and the screen, and we shown those movies during their 50th wedding anniversary party. And so why not do that and just see what your family members have to say? Discuss the people, the places, the objects in these home movies and slides. Again, don't go directly for the people, but talk about the places that these home movies were taken or objects that you see. I know that we picked out some of the different things that were in my grandmother's home that I remembered and my parents remembered, my siblings remembered, and we started talking about those. But then those stories moved on to other things in the home, and then it brought us right back to the people. And we started talking about the people. I was able to get a tremendous amount of information from having this type of event, showing these movies that I would never have been able to get before. So next are family recipes. I tell you what, something that is always at a family gathering, no matter what kind of family gathering it is food. We all love to eat. And we love to eat at our family gatherings. And I don't know about you, but I love it when I go to a family gathering and that special dish that that certain family member makes every time we get together is there. I love when that happens. So why not use food and family recipes to your advantage? This is actually a recipe my grandmother Curtis Leemaster loved recipes. She was a fantastic cook, and this is her recipe for chocolate chiffon pie. And so I have all of her recipe boxes, which are a true treasure for me. Ask family members about family recipes. Just ask them, say, do you remember that recipe that grandma used to make? And I guarantee you that if they remember it, you can have a whole conversation about that recipe. But what it will do is it will translate from talking about the recipe to talking about that family member, talking about events where she would bring this recipe to. And you just don't know where these conversations will lead and the information you're going to be able to find. Ask things like, who made certain recipes? Do we remember when so and so Aunt Myrtle made that particular recipe? Who prepared the recipes? Do you remember the dishes they used to bring the recipes in? Who was that family member that always brought the 7-layer salad? Just recently, my brother and I actually had a conversation about a chicken salad recipe that my grandmother used to make. And we talked about, because we were trying to recreate it, because my grandmother didn't leave a recipe for that one. So we were trying to recreate it. And in the midst of us trying to recreate that recipe, we talked about some family memories and some family information that he was able to share with me that I didn't know. Luckily, my brother's wife, my sister-in-law, was able to prepare it from us describing it, and it tasted just like my grandmother's. So, what do your family members remember about the food in the family, the recipes, and the people that made them? There may be true stories associated with these recipes and with these food items that you never knew about, and it's something that you can collect. One more thing on family recipes. One of the things that my mother-in-law did that I'm so grateful for is that when my husband and I got married, she created a handmade cookbook for him. And she put a lot of the family recipes in there. But what she did is she put stories with those recipes of where she got the recipe, the people that she associated with this recipe, his grandparents, his aunts, uncles, and even just neighbors that she got recipes from. And so we still have that cookbook, and those little stories that she put in there are really, really great. We love it. So next thing that we can use to help getting our family members to start talking about family history are some of the handmade artifacts that our ancestors and family members have made in the past. I know that we all have something in our homes that maybe one of our family members or even an ancestor has made. Many of our family members and ancestors were very talented in one area or another, and so they made things. And those were usually saved and just placed on a shelf, put in a box. And why not bring those out and show them to your family members? Talk about the people who made them. And so this is another tactic that we can use to get our family members to start talking. My mother was a quilter. She made quilts. And so that's something that I have that I'm going to be able to pass down to my daughter, to my grandson, and to their descendants. This is actually an example of a church member name quilt from the 1920s. This quilt was actually made in the 1920s, and it was made for a fundraiser for a church. And if you gave money, you got your name on the quilt. And so these names are stitched all over the quilt, and it's a fantastic thing to see in person. Maybe this is the kind of quilt that you've seen in your family. This is a World War I quilt. It was made by Mrs. V.R. Harris and church members during April of 1917. And this is what's called a name quilt. They actually wrote the names of soldiers all over this quilt. There's over 200 names on this quilt. And back then, of course, just remember, this is 1917. This is World War I, before we even had World War II. So they didn't call it World War I then. They called it the German-American War. And as you can see that there on the quilt. So this one, I was actually called upon, you can see me there in the picture, to come and evaluate this quilt to see if there's any damage or how to preserve it. It was actually donated to Tennessee Ridge, the local city here in Houston County, and it actually hangs in the Tennessee Ridge City Hall. And so it's a great testament to that war, and it's also commemorates the men who are listed on this quilt, who some did survive, some didn't. And so maybe you have some of these things in your family history that you can bring out, show to family members, and get them to start talking about it. This was actually from my husband's side of the family. He had a fantastically talented wood carver in his family. His name was Clarence Stringfield. And so these are some of the examples of his work. Actually, some examples of his work are in the Smithsonian Institute in the United States. Down there at the bottom right is a photograph of Clarence. One of my goals is to actually try to get a hold of a piece of his art for my own collection. However, I have seen some auctions for his art, and they go for some pretty high prices. And so far, I've not been able to afford one. But what if your ancestor or your family members did woodworking? My father actually did woodworking. I have several of his pieces. Why not bring these out at a family gathering and talk about them? I'm telling you, when you start talking to your family members about pieces like this, sure, you're going to talk about the wood pieces or the quilt or whatever it is that they have made. But then you end up started talking about the people who actually did the work. And that's where you're headed for. You may have some famous artisans in your family, and you may have not so famous artisans. I know I have a couple of pieces of handmade clothing that were made by my grandmother. And so back then, they made all their clothes normally. And so you could bring that out and even talk about the fact that people had to make their own clothes and that they didn't just go get store-bought clothes all the time. That's something that maybe will pique the interest of another family member. A lot of times what we don't know is we don't know what's going to pique the interest of our family member and get them talking. So we have to use several of these things in conjunction with themselves to try to get them talking. Ordinary objects that are sitting around may create a conversation. This is actually an interesting conversation that I had with my local historical society. These are called electric telephone glass insulators. This is what used to be up on tall electric poles for electricity. I don't understand how they work, but I found some and I thought that I had made a huge find. And so I brought them to our local historical society meeting when we were having show and tell. And I brought them out. This is a picture of me when I was talking about it. And I brought them out and I talked about these like they were the biggest find I had ever found. And many of the old timers sitting in the audience for the Historical Society were looking at me like I was crazy because they said, these are ordinary objects. You used to be able to walk down the street and pick these up just any old time. And so I felt kind of silly, but I learned a lot about these, and it's something that I brought out. It got my historical society talking about them. So I got a lot of information that I wrote down for the archives where I work. Why not talk about stuff from the past? Blasts from the past, as I call it. Here's some old school supplies. If you have something like this, why not show it to some of your relatives and get them to talk about their experiences in school? I would suggest maybe even go over to My Heritage, pull up some of the yearbooks, and look at those and talk about their experience in school. Just this weekend, my husband and I went to an event at our old high school. We kind of slipped away and walked through the halls and was reminiscing about all of the things that took place when we went to school there. So you need to use everything at your disposal to try to get your family members talking. Historical events, local events, and even national and world events can get your family members talking. Our family members lived through a lot of historical events. We may not even realize the events that they lived through. I mean, we ourselves have lived through events, and they need to be telling their experiences about what they experienced through these events and whether they are at the local level, the national level in the country that they lived, or even a world level, such as a world war. Using these events and recording what our family members experienced, how they felt during that time, the stories that their parents and older people in the family told about these events can actually add to your genealogy research and your family story. Some of the few that I thought about that are asked all the time is, where were you when JFK was assassinated? If you live in the United States, you know that in 1963, JFK, our president, was assassinated. And so that's one of those things that you're asked all the time. Where were you when JFK was assassinated? And so many people can tell exactly where they were, what they were doing, and how it affected them. I've asked several family members this particular question. While JFK's assassination has absolutely nothing to do with my family, it has everything to do with what my family experienced, and it's part of their story. What was it like during the Great Depression? The Great Depression wasn't just in the United States, it hit many other countries. And so, what was it like for everybody? I actually asked my husband's grandmother about this. What was it like during the Great Depression? She lived here in Houston County, a very rural part of Tennessee. And they lived on a farm and they grew everything. And so I asked her, I said, what was it like? She said, really for us, we really didn't know that there was a depression going on because we grew everything that we ate. We raised pigs and cattle. The only thing that they actually had to purchase was coffee, sugar, and tobacco. And so if they couldn't get those, then they felt like they were having some problems. But other than that, she told me. But then I've also talked to my side of the family who lived in big cities, and they had a much harder time. And so recording those stories from both sides is important to contrast them and to just gather that information because what they experienced is part of their story. Here's some other things. A picture from the Burcham family from the Great Depression. Maybe you have ration books. I have my father's World War II ration books from when he was born in 42, so he was only just a few years old when World War II happened. Local events. We've all experienced these local events, and so have your family members, and so have your ancestors. Things like floods and natural disasters. Now, while they're not pleasant to talk about, maybe they're far enough away from the event that they can talk about it, and they can talk about their personal experience. They can talk about locally what happened. And so just recently, we had a very tragic flood that happened not too far from where I live. 20 people died. It was absolutely horrible. It happened in August. And so while it's something you're not going to talk about today, in a few years, you may be able to talk about that with those family members. Maybe something as simple as going to the local fair every year is something you can talk to your ancestors about, or something like this that came around every year, that came to the city, the circus, the fair, things like that, that came to their city, to them, and that was a big deal for them to go and experience. So let's talk about family traditions. This is one of the last things I wanted to talk about because I think that all of us have family traditions. I think a lot of our families have lost a lot of their family traditions because they haven't been passed down. They haven't been retold. And for example, several years ago, I was attending my cousin's wedding in Akron, Ohio. And we were there for several days. And so my father and my brother and myself decided to go out and to just ride around in the car because this is where my father grew up, in this area. And he started pointing out homes where his family members lived, the school where he went to school. And we passed this one house, and he said, well, that's where Grandma Lou lived, and that's where we always had the family reunion. Now, I was in my 40s, and I had been doing genealogy research for already a while. He had never told me that his family had family reunions. And I asked him, I said, you've never told me about family reunions. Why does we not have family reunions anymore? And he said, because when Grandma died, the family reunions stopped. And that's what's happened to a lot of our family traditions. When a certain family member passes away, they were the ones who were in charge of organizing whatever it was, making sure that family tradition went on every single year or every time it was supposed to. When they're no longer here, a lot of those family traditions die off with them. So it's important that we document these family traditions so that we can continue to pass them on. We may not actually do them, but if we have them documented, we can at least have them, the history of them. Find out who started the tradition and why was the tradition started. Maybe there's a reason why that particular tradition was started. Where did these traditions originate? Maybe they originated with when our family came over from overseas to the United States, or maybe it originated from when people came from the United States and went to a different country. And so maybe they observed those things today even. And so maybe you don't even know it's a tradition. Maybe it's just something that you do. But if you find out it's a family tradition, you find out the origins of that tradition, that is a fantastic family story to put in your genealogy. One of the things that I did for another thing that I did with my mom and dad's 50th wedding anniversary is we played a game. We played a wonderful game that helped me, honestly, to gather some information from a lot of my family members. And so you can play this game at a family reunion or a birthday party or an anniversary like I did. Many of you may remember the Newlywed Game. This was on TV when I was younger. And what it was is they would have newlyweds on there and they would ask them questions and they could see if their answers would match, and whoever matched more questions wins the game. So what I did with my family is on my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, I came up with 10 questions. And I made sure to put questions on there that would specifically get me information about all of my family members. And of course, we had couples. I had my aunts and uncles. I had cousins who were couples, my siblings that were couples. And so I put them together and we asked the questions and then we compared the answers. And whoever got the most questions right won the game. But at the end of the game, I gathered up all the pieces of paper from where they answered those questions. And so I asked questions like, where did you get married? Or when was your first date? Things like that, that helps you to get information for your genealogy research. So this is a really kind of an interesting thing to do, and they'll never know that they were helping you with your genealogy. So how do you record all this information? If you are paying attention to all these family gatherings, going to all the trouble to try to gather this information, how do we record the information? Write it down. Many times you're in the midst of the actual event, and so you can't really get to a computer or something. Have some scrap paper, have a pencil, pen, jot down whatever the family's talking to. Even if they're sitting there telling you, whip out that piece of paper and start writing it down because you'll think you're going to remember it. And if there's a lot of information given to you, you may not remember all of it. And so be sure to come prepared to those family events by bringing something to record this information. And remember, No piece of information is too small, because you never know when that small piece of information is going to answer a genealogy question that you have later on down the road. So make sure and record everything. Recording devices. I would caution you about using recording devices. We all have them on our phones. I would just make sure, if you're going to use recording devices, to let your family members know that you're recording. Maybe the best way to do that is to set up a recorder, a video recorder for the event. Just tell them, we're going to record this event so that we can have it recorded for our descendants. And that way you can record the stories and the things that they talk about. But if your family members don't want it recorded, then I would ask you to just respect those wishes, and just try to write things down. Collect today for tomorrow. This is something that I say as an archivist. Collect today for tomorrow. As genealogists, we ourselves are experiencing things on a day-to-day basis. Our family members are experiencing things on a day-to-day basis. We normally collect those old records, old photographs and things from our ancestors. But don't forget the documents of today. Like if you go to a graduation, get that graduation program and tuck it away in your genealogy materials. The photographs that you take, especially the photographs you take on your phone, be sure to download those off your phone and preserve them, because if they get lost on that phone or if they get deleted somehow, they're gone. So collect things from today that are going to be old 100 years from now, and believe me, your descendants will be glad that you did. Take photographs at those family events. Make sure and download them to your computer. Make sure and get them in an external hard drive, a thumb drive, some way so that they're protected. And then add the metadata. What is metadata? Metadata is extra information that you put with the photograph, that if you share that photograph, that data goes with it. It could be the date of the photograph. It could be an explanation of who's in the photograph, what the event is. And so always put that metadata with your photographs. Collect documents such as graduation programs, those funeral home cards, wedding invitations, baby shower invitations. These kinds of things are happening all the time. And so why not gather these records now, put them in your genealogy files so that in 100 years, they're old then, but they've been saved. How would you like? Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a graduation program from 100 years ago and your great grandfather graduated high school? That's what I'm talking about, collecting today for tomorrow. So thank you very much. I really hope I've given you some tips and tricks on getting your family members talking when you gather with them, whenever that may be. Please visit my blog, Genealogist in the Archives, and you can also find me on Facebook. Just search for The Archive Lady. You'll find my page, and please like my page. If you have any questions whatsoever about this presentation, you can email me if we don't get to it today, but email me with any questions about researching in archives, records preservation. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Esther for any questions that we may have.
Okay. Can everyone hear me now? I hope that the sound is working okay at this half of the session. So first of all, thank you, Melissa. That was amazing. And I just see so many comments rolling in about some of these suggestions and how they've worked also for our viewers. So I wanted to read a few ideas that I noticed in the comments. So the first one was Vitor in our audience, and he said exactly what you said, Melissa, which is, often people didn't talk or don't want, they're in kind of a shell. And then he said, I remember my grandma saying she didn't remember anything, but after some time she couldn't stop talking. Definitely. And we have another comment here from Tony. And she said, I sent a journal to each of my siblings and asked them to write stories that they remember about their childhood, things they feel are memorable for them, stories about things they did when they were with friends, away from home, stories from school memories. Then, after we spent about 6 months filling out the books, we sent them to each other so we could read them and learn about each other. The stories were eye-opening on the fun things they did and explored when they were with friends, memories of family Christmases past. I now hold all of the books. Here, I see actually a comment or two that they're not able to hear you. I don't. This is very strange today. So I'm guessing everyone can hear me. So Melissa, can you just try refreshing your browser? It seems that that's what worked for me. So so let's see if we can get that up and running. Can everyone hear me? Melissa's going to come back, and hopefully we can get her back in, and you'll let us know if you can hear her now. I don't know what these sound issues are that we're having today. So Melissa, talk, and let's see if everyone in the audience can hear you. Oh, now I can't hear you actually. Also,
How about now? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Let's see if our audience. So let us know if you can hear Melissa in the audience,
Oh, good.
and hopefully that means that we can ask you a few more questions.
Sure.
No,
Uh-oh.
I see some no's, some yes.
I know.
Okay, so let's see if we can hear. I don't. Oh no, I think it's not working again. So
Oh,
Melissa, I'm just. Let's see.
you want me to
Let's
refresh again or?
just one more time and let's
Okay.
see. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna just try one more time and let's see. Hopefully this time we got it. Okay.
How's that?
So okay, yes, I think they say they can hear us both. So let's hope
Wonderful.
that solved the issue. So I love these comments coming in. Thank you everyone for being such a receptive audience despite the technical difficulties. We apologize. As much as we try, we're dependent on these services. So we're so glad that you're all hanging in there with us. So we were talking about the idea that Tony sent us about asking her siblings to write in journals and write their childhood stories and then to share them amongst the siblings so that they could all experience, their childhood memories. And that was just such a lovely idea.
I really love that idea for a lot of reasons, but I mean, then you can see where you and your experiences come into play with theirs. But I think also it helps us to understand our family members, what they experienced, what they went through that we maybe not even have known about. And so I think it just helps us become closer family members too.
So lovely. And it's really so much about what you were talking about with me at the beginning about the experiences that your brother went through versus what you went
Yes.
through.
Yeah. I think
So
sometimes we think that because we lived under the same household, that everybody experienced the same things and have the same feelings, and we're all individuals and we experience things differently. And so it's important that we understand that.
we have, I see a question here from Bobby, and she said, "How do you find room to store all of these treasures and to properly to preserve them? I have a few binders using archival sheet protectors."
You just do the best you can. I was not gifted a lot of things. Documents or photographs from my family, so I don't have a whole lot to store. But then I've talked to people who have hundreds of letters and tons of photographs, and so and I understand that not all of us can live in an archive. I wish we all could. But you just do the best you can. Main thing with any kind of records preservation is wherever you store your items, just make sure it's a cool, dark, dry place. And so you can find any nook and cranny to put your items in. But main thing too is to get them digitized. If you digitize them, if for some reason you want to donate them to an archive or hand them to another family member, you've digitized them and you have preserved the essence of those records.
Another suggestion that I read here in the comments, which I thought was so lovely, was from Marianne, and she said, "Once I was able to make connections and contact with family in Norway, that side of the family really became interested. I've printed out our family tree, and I hung the 30-foot family tree on a wall at the reunion. Being able to see our family back into the 1600s made everyone pay attention. I created a Facebook page dedicated to our Norwegian family reunion to get the younger generations interested, where I share posts of Norway and the family info."
That's wonderful because I know that we all have those family members that just don't understand why we do what we do. We look into our family history, and they don't think they know anything. But when you show them, I have found that when you tell them the really interesting family stories of how the family, what they lived through, show them an artifact or something, it really gets them talking. And that family tree must have been amazing, and so that is something to behold and something that would get your family members talking.
But a treasure to have a family tree that goes back that far and to be able to share it with all your family at one time. We have, we'll just take one last question before we go to our giveaway. So this question is from Tambra, and she asks, would you search for World War I or for the German-American War when looking for information about family during that time period?
I would actually, for records of the time, I would look for the German-American War and World War One because the World War One did not come until after World War Two. So you think about that. The World War Two years forward, I would look for World War One, but before that, I would look for it mentioned in different titles because uh, different countries called it different things, and so yeah, I would search for different things. And also use your dates when you're searching because a lot of times that will narrow it down.
And Tambra also wrote this really nice comment where she said, "My uncle has expressed his pleasure with me being the family historian. He has actually started a journal about his life. He's shared some of his thoughts with me. It's fantastic. I get a different perspective of his family than other family members of the family, and it's a wonderful quilt of experiences."
That's wonderful. And even if they tell you, they're not interested, I think we rub off on them sometimes. And so, but that's a good thing because, not everybody needs to be as addicted as we are. But I think if we can get them to just pay attention to their own stories and getting them documented is a good thing.
So true. So everyone has lots of work lined up for them to get cracking, and so many great ideas of ways to approach it as a problem. Different generations, different
Hmm.
people in the family, just so many different ways of tackling it.
Yes, and so next time you have that family gathering, whatever it is, be prepared to try something different to get them to talk.
So now we have the pleasure of giving away a MyHeritage Complete Plan, the best plan that we have to offer at MyHeritage. It will give one lucky winner unlimited access to over 15 billion historical records. And of course, we're adding historical records every week here at MyHeritage. Unlimited family tree size, access to all the MyHeritage photo tools, and much, much more. And our winner today is Annette Middlemess. And Annette wrote us and she said, I managed to confirm a story that an ancestor died after surviving the ship trip from the UK to New Zealand. She died from heat stroke in a heat wave walking, which was documented in an early newspaper. My father said, "Oh, you worked that out." So, congratulations, Annette, and we'll be in touch with you through private message to claim your prize. And of course, all these family stories that you hear. Melissa, what are your, I guess, last tips about confirming the stories and everything that we do drag out of family members? How do we balance what we believe as hearing it from the horse's mouth and proving that and backing it up with sources?
Oh, I'm all about gathering the stories, but I also know that those stories are not going to be 100% true. But get the stories anyway. One of the things I can share with you real quick, this last story is my husband's third great grandfather was actually shot and killed in 1919. And so there was a story with that, and the story was is that he and his neighbor were having a boundary dispute, and one day that neighbor was going to work in the fields, and he had his shotgun and he had his dog, and I thought, okay. As they were going to the fields, his dog started barking at this tree, and when he turned and looked, my husband's third great grandfather was in that tree with his shotgun, and they shot at each other, and my husband's great great grandfather actually got killed. And so I thought, I wonder if that story is really true because all I could find in the court records was that it was a shooting, but it was self defense. So I reached out to a descendant of the neighbor. It was his nephew. And I did not tell him my story. I said, "Tell me your story." He told me his story, and his story was exactly like the story of my husband's family. And so I thought, well, that's pretty rare for have two stories be the same. But when you're gathering stories, try to prove what you can. Don't discount the stuff that you can't prove. Leave it in there. Even say in your writings that, we don't know if this is true or not. But I like to keep the stories intact, not only because a lot of times it adds a little bit of fun stuff to it, but do try to prove what you can. But like you may not be able to prove it all, but the stories are just fun.
They add so much color to
They
the
do.
tree, to the family tree, and to your ancestors. Paint a real picture of who they were.
They do.
Just one nice comment to end off this Facebook Live with. Tony just wrote to us and said, "This has been one of my most enjoyable My Heritage Facebook Live events." Thank you.
Thank
So
you,
thank you
Tony.
so
I'm
much.
glad you enjoyed it.
So thank you so much for joining us, Melissa. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Esther. I appreciate it.
And everyone in the audience, thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you again next time. Bye, everyone.